Hello everyone, it's Mary. Welcome back to the channel. I'm excited to bring this video to you today because it's a compilation of 10 background techniques, 10 of my favorite. It is not all inclusive, meaning there are certainly more ways to do this, but I thought maybe this would get us started in some inspiration and you can refer back to the video when you're ready to make some stuff. So the first one we're going to jump into is alcohol inks. Alcohol inks are so fun. It's just magic when you're dropping this stuff down onto paper. I'm going to go through this video. There's going to be a few clips of past videos, so little disclaimer on that. Anything that you want to see made in full, I will link the video below. But when you're playing with alcohol inks, there are many brands. There's Ranger, there's Pinata, and Brearis, and more than that. You just want to maybe do your own cost comparison. These are the pearl inks from Ranger, and just see what, draws your attention in. I would say that it's often recommended to use Yupo paper or a synthetic paper. I know Brearis makes waterproof paper, and it's very cost effective. But you can also use cheaper things like poster board or the back of photos, photo paper. Sometimes the front of photo paper, depending on the brand. So just keep that in mind when you are searching for your products. You can also use things like this blower tool from Ranger. Some people use hair dryers or maybe a heat tool or a tool that has a cool setting. So anything that you find, just experiment with. Be careful with alcohol inks though, because they are it's a lot of fumes. So make sure you're well ventilated area. And maybe not use them for too long. I know we had them open in my house for a while and they were fuming up the place, so we had to give it a rest. But also what's fun about alcohol, as you saw in the last clip here, I'm adding some foil. So some of that tacky ink stays behind and then you can add some foil to it. Here are just a couple of the projects that I made with a little bit of different techniques for using the alcohol. This one I had drip from the top and used that really fun, neat, and tangled stamp set. This was the rainbow one that I was making on the background, which just was so fun to make. And then lastly, I'm going to show you the pearl inks up close in the purple and blue hues. So alcohol inks are a wonderful way to make lots and lots of backgrounds and just a lot of fun to play with because you'll never get the same result twice. They're always going to be different. The second technique is using dye inks. Now dye inks, there's multiple ways to use. Of course, they're really good for stamping, but we're talking about backgrounds today. So the first thing I'm going to show you with dye inks is ink smushing. Ink smushing. Now, a lot of these techniques cross each other over. So you can use, for example, we'll talk about Oxide inks. You can use those for these same techniques, but I'm just going to show you what your results look like. So here I'm using Catherine Puller dye inks and I'm using the same three colors. And even with the same three colors, you get such a variety of backgrounds. Now I am using a couple different hues in each color, but here are some of the finished cards for the ink smushing technique. I picked out a few different hues of the primary colors and you can see just the beautiful result. This is another technique that you're going to never get the same look twice. If you let it dry a little bit and then add some layering, you'll start to see a little bit more of that color change. You can get splatter looks on these. Also, dye inks like Catherine Puller are water reactive, and so you could add droplets of water and you would be able to see some of that reaction. On this example here, you can see some of that happening on the background. So also with dye inks, you can ink blend with them. Now, not all dye inks will react the same, but most of them you can get a nice ink blend with them. So I'm taking out a makeup brush here. This is probably the best recommendation I have for when you're using dye inks, because dye inks don't have a pigment property, so they don't have that smooth agent as they say the oxides would. So because of that, a makeup brush type brush or the blending brushes that are out there are going to give you that option of a very smooth application. And I think that's the difference between using like a Ranger foam tool with dye inks and the makeup brushes. You just get such a smoother look. Also, the paper matters. So here I'm using Bristol Smooth. And with Bristol Smooth and a makeup brush applicator, you're going to be able to see and put on your dye inks a lot more evenly. So these are some of the differences. You can see here, just in these two examples, you have the ink smushing and you have the ink blending, and both of those were made with the same colors, the same exact colors from Catherine Puller. So you can just see with dye inks, you can have a lot of fun. You can get different techniques. Again, these particular inks are water reactive, so you can get some of that water distress look on them. Let's move into color bursts. Color bursts are another magical way to make backgrounds. They're so fun, and I'm going to show you two different ways that I use them. The first way is to drop the powder down onto watercolor cardstock, and then we are going to spritz it with water, and you can see them come alive. Now, color bursts are the name brand. These are from Catherine Puller, but you can also find other brands such as Brusho and the Nouveau shimmer powders. So all kind of the same concept, where they're really vibrant, lots of pigment, water reactive, watercolor type of medium. So the second way that I use color bursts is the ink smushing technique, which I gave a try and I didn't know if it was going to work out, but it's so fun. Again, all of these videos in full will be linked below so that you can check out the from start to finish, the way that I made the cards. But of course, I'm just using snippets here to kind of show you. But these are the same colors, and you can see here as I'm just really controlling how I want to pick that up and how I want to kind of mix it on the cardstock. I'm using watercolor cardstock here, but I was really impressed with this look. Such a splatter type of artistic background that I was able to get that I haven't really been able to get as much with other mediums that you do the ink smushing technique. So it's a little bit different in this way with the color bursts. So that was a lot of fun to experiment with and to kind of see how these things came out. Also, can I just say, it's super fun to just spray it and watch it come alive. So very simple. I'm a simple gal. But you can see here, I'm just getting some super colors. And if you've been watching any of my videos, none of this footage is new to you. But it's just a lot of fun to kind of see it come together. Again, I didn't use a huge variety of these colors. These color bursts from Catherine Puller have multiple colors within one, which definitely helps get a palette that's pretty large. So yeah, so that was a lot of fun to use the color bursts both in the, I guess, traditional way that you would use them. Here I'm just tapping some more powder down into that glob of water and spraying it, and you can see I get purple. So yeah, you can use them in the traditional way. You can also wet your paper first and then drop them on. That's something that I'm not showing you in this video, but that's another way to put down your color bursts. I find that when I go straight to paper with the powder, that I get too dark of a look, as you saw in the first example, and I'll show you some close-ups here. When I'm doing it this way, I get a lot more control over the color and the amount of pigment that gets put onto the paper. And that's really helpful because, well, I mean, who doesn't like to kind of control what they're doing on the cardstock? So that'll do it for the color bursts background. I'm going to show you a couple projects here and how I finished them off. These were the final backgrounds for the ink smushing technique, and here are some of those finished cards. What's great about you can make so many backgrounds and then you can just pull them out, grab some sentiments, maybe some things you've been coloring separately. A lot of times I don't make cards always start to finish. I have them in pieces. Let's move on to our next background technique, and that's Distress Oxide. So if you've been a fan of the Distress line for a while, you know that there are regular Distress inks and then there are the Distress Oxide inks. So here I'm going to show you one of the greatest ways to use these Oxide inks, and that is ink blending. They are probably my favorite ink to blend onto cardstock with because they leave such a smooth finish. This is one card that I did recently that shows this in full. The Distress Oxide line has every hue of the rainbow that you can imagine, and unapologetically, I own all of them. They're fantastic, and I use them quite a bit. So the first technique is the ink blending that I'm going to show you. One thing I learned while I was doing this mix right here is that I use different hues of different colors because I'm doing a slimline card. So instead of just picking one green, I chose the Twisted Citron then into a darker green, which a lot of times on shorter card panels I don't do. I will use sort of like primary colors and allow them to mix on their own, which is great and it does work. But this is allowing me to have a much richer and full spectrum of the color. So that is why I wanted to show you. This was the best example that I had of really putting that rainbow down. I'm using a blender brush here. This one's from Trinity Stamps. It's the perfect size for what I'm trying to do, because if I was to use the other makeup brush that I was using previously, that might just be a little bit too big of a surface for the size that I'm trying to get in my ink blending. So I showed you at the very beginning of this clip what colors I was using. Keep in mind I am also using Bristol Smooth Cardstock, which has a very smooth finish on it and will allow that blending to happen seamlessly. It really does help and it matters. But with Distress Oxides, what's great about this ink is that you can also use it just on any regular cardstock and still get a very good blend. So keep that in mind. They have a pigment property as well as a dye property. And so they're sort of a hybrid that allow you to do a lot of different things. They stamp okay as well. Not the best stamping, but they definitely stamp, particularly if you have a stamp positioning tool. Here I'm just wet some of that leftover ink and I'm going to pick it up and smush it because that is another great thing about the Distress Oxides. What's great about these, I don't show you Distress inks in this video because it's a dye ink. So I showed you another brand of dye inks previously. But with the Oxide inks, what's great about them is once they dry, if you can use them, use a heat tool or just let it air dry, and then you go back in and add some more of the layering, you're going to lay the color on top of itself. So here I'm showing you, I made a bunch of military themed cards. Sort of a non-traditional that we would normally see patriotic card. Normally we might see it in red, white, and blue theme, but here I'm going more for the color of the uniforms as the back. So like I said, I let it dry and then I went back in with some different splatters, and you can see it layer right on top and just kind of be the star of the show on the top with some of that. And you can see the different layering. It's just great. I love doing ink smushing with Distress Oxide. It's just such a great medium. I use them all the time. I probably use them the most out of any ink of my full collection. They are just that good. So I'm just showing you here a couple pictures of some projects of the ones that I finished off here. So you have that beautiful background and then you just add a stamped image on the front and you're done. Let's move into our next one, which is gouache. So gouache was so fun to experiment with and to figure out how it works. Gouache, right here, I'm showing you the first technique that I'm doing with gouache, is that I am stamping it onto my paper. So I laid it down onto my mat and I just wet it a tiny bit and then spread it out with a paintbrush. Then I have sort of like my ink palette. Gouache is, the best way to describe it, is a mix between acrylic paint and watercolor paint. So it works beautifully with water, but it's a lot more pigmented and a little bit more concentrated. So it really is the best of both worlds. And I thought, why not try to stamp with it? So I pulled out this MFT stamp right here, and it's sort of like a background, like a, what is that called? Abstract background type of stamp. And I did that. The second thing I'm doing with gouache is I am going to ink blend it onto my card panel. So I'm loving that shadow look here. I don't show you this full process, but I'll show you the card in a little bit because you just can blend it on and kind of work it through. I learned this technique from Sandra from Create in Spain. She did amazing things with her gouache, and I had to give it a try, and it works so beautifully. So this is like a watercolor-ish medium, but I'm using it with a blending brush. So it's just such a great one to have in your stash. I love my gouache. So here's a close-up look at that card on the left-hand side. You can see just adding some white splatters, some sentiments, and a couple images. We'll finish that one off. Okay, so let's move on to the next thing I used gouache for. So this one right here was ink smushing as well. Disregard that number 4. That was from the original video. But I'm going to wet my watercolor cardstock here, which is black watercolor cardstock, and I am going to just ink smush it down. I thought this was such an interesting look. You'll see in the finished card, it was probably the weirdest card, I dubbed it, that I've ever made because of its just unique property. I have never seen kind of that. It almost looks like clouds, but also, I don't know, like a storm. It was just a very interesting, and you'll see the sentiment I chose for this one. But I was using the metallic gouache right here. So the previous, I was using just the regular gouache. These ones were the metallic ones. But I just thought that background was so interesting. And here you can see a close-up of it. And I chose the sentiment, when you can't look on the bright side, I'll sit with you in the dark. Yeah, so just finished it off with a couple hearts and 2 little girls there. So next I'm going to show you gouache as sort of watercoloring. So the first thing I did on this card was I heat embossed it with a starry background. And then I'm going to go in with my gouache colors. Now remember, gouache is a little bit more pigmented, so you're going to get it's going to be a lot easier to put it down, and I don't have to layer it up continuously to get the colors that I want. So that's one thing I really, really enjoyed about the gouache when I was experimenting with it. Right here I'm making a galaxy background. So the white splatters are already done for me because I had heat embossed with that background. This background is from Hero Arts, and I will link something comparable, but it's one of, like, having a background like this is one of the best things for your stash. I just have to find something comparable for you all, or if you have something, please share with us. But it's so easy because it takes the guesswork out of making it look like a galaxy with your splatters and whatnot. So it's just another option to do that. But I'm placing down some more of that color to make this galaxy sort of come to life. You'll see in the finished card, I add a little bit of black, right? Because out in the galaxy, it's not just beautiful colors like this. There's that black sky around. So that's what I'm going to do for this. Before that, I'm just going to add a little bit of this Lawn Fawn iridescent just to give it a little bit of a sparkle. And then I'm going to finish it off like so. So you can see I took some Distress ink in the black soot and just kind of went around the edges of it a little bit in the center. This way it makes it look a little bit more galaxy-like. Let's talk mica powder. Mica powder was one of my 2020 discoveries that I just love. So this is the 60 set from Arteza. You can also get a 35 set where the bottles are a little bit larger. Well, quite larger. But I opted for the 60 set, and I'm going to show you a couple different things that I've done with mica powder. So here is the powder all swatched out, both on black cardstock and white, just so you can see the same colors and what the differences are. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use some sticky ink here. This is from Gina K, and I'm putting it down with a Ranger tool, a foam tool. And because that is my bonding agent, the mica powder is going to go down very much like Perfect Pearls. It's just going to go down and it's going to stay. But to make sure that it stays, I do spray it at the end with a little bit of hairspray. So I have some Tresemme in my craft stash. It's crazy how things are like cross-referencing from life to the craft room. You know, some people have like press and seal. I've seen people use just all kinds of random things. But yes, Tresemme hairspray. All right, so I'm going to just keep putting this down in rainbow order, and you can see how beautiful that is. I'm going to show you a couple different examples of the look that I get using the sticky ink first. So you can use Versamark ink, and there's just a bunch of companies that make different sticky inks. So whatever you got, you can use it. And I'm just going over for a second layer on this one. Let's peel that mask back, which is always the most exciting part of any masking technique is the big reveal. So we're going to pull that off, and here you can just see that stark black cardstock against these beautiful rainbow colors. And I should mention the mica powders have a pearlescent look. So not only are they really fun to play with, but they give you this really cool pearlescent sheen on your project. So this one right here is the opposite. You can see I did one where I put the inlay heart. This one was the masking I showed you, and the other one was the opposite. So just a lot of fun. I made them sort of look like galaxies, just added some white splatter and a sentiment. So mica powders work best when you add an agent called gum arabic to them. I highly recommend that, particularly when you're using them as watercolors. So in the first example I showed you, the Versamark or the sticky ink was the bonding agent. But here, when you're using them as loose powders, adding gum arabic to them is going to allow them to stick onto your paper for good. It makes them exactly like the Perfect Pearls. So the Perfect Pearls already has that agent in, but the mica powders do not. The mica powders can be used for far more things than just card making, of course. So there are a myriad of things people use them. They use them in candles. I've seen them in resin. So lots of different things that you can do with mica powders. But because I'm a card maker and a paper crafter, this is how I made them work here. So people who have watched the video I was doing with the mica powders were super helpful and let me know about that agent called gum arabic. And when I used it, I even did a video on my channel. You can see me compare using the mica powders with the gum arabic and without, so you can see the huge difference. But like I said, all of these videos are in full and on my channel. And the ones I'm showing in this video, I will list below. So here I'm making another galaxy. Obviously, I'm obsessed with making galaxies because I've made a ton. And I also have a video on 6 ways to make a galaxy. But okay. But this one right here, I just wanted to show you the finished card for that. Mica powder is not, like I said, it's not just for paper crafting. I also put some Versamark on my nails, and then I painted my nails with it and put a little top coat. And there we go. All right, let's move into pattern paper. So pattern paper is probably one of the least messy and easiest ways to get a background for your card. So for this example here, I'm going to show you, I pulled out some of this pattern paper. I'm using some Spellbinders dies for this video. I'm not going to show you videos for pattern paper because it's basically just cutting up and placing it down. So there's no need to see that in action. But I am going to show you a bunch of different examples. Most recently, I did a collab with Christy Marcotte and Jen Bina from Scrap Bina Creations, where in total we made 61 cards together. So I made 10, and I know, I really didn't pull my weight. You see the number? There's a huge disparity there, but I did my best, and I had so much fun making all of these cards. They were just so fun, and I'm not a pattern paper person all the time. If you look in past videos, I'm more of an inky gal. But when I was pulling out this Chloe collection from Bella Boulevard, I just had so much fun. It was great. So there's some examples of pattern paper. Let's talk next about stamping and masking. So I put these two techniques together for a background because I'm going to show you it's sort of the same concept. So they count as one. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my background essentially from stamping. You can do that in a couple ways. In the first way I'm showing you, I'm going to mask out. Here you can see me stamping out on the right hand side onto some masking paper. I use rock, paper, scissors removable label sheets. They're really cost effective, and you get a huge box that'll last you forever. So that's what I use for my masking. And I am going to then just cover up some of those leaves and then go back in and mask some more. For this technique, I'm using Bristol Smooth Cardstock as well as watercoloring friendly ink, which is Versa Fine Clair Nocturne. I'm going to be coloring these images with some real brush pens. And so because that's water, you want an ink that's not going to get all, that's not going to bleed all into your project. So that is what I'm using for these. So you can just see as you stamp, you mask, and then you go on to do some more masking and some more stamping. Keep in mind, if you're new to masking, you want the image that you want to be in the front of your picture, you're going to stamp out first. So if you'll notice in the beginning of this video, I stamped 3 different leaves. And that was because I didn't want all of the leaves to fall one behind another. So I made those 2 at the very front. They were going to be the ones in the front of my picture. Once that's done, I'm not going to show you all the coloring here, but I went through and colored, and then I'm just adding some light blue to the background. So again, I know a broken record, but these videos are in full if you want to check them out from start to finish with the coloring, and you can find that below. Because I know sometimes it's sort of like you get in the groove of the video, then like compilation videos, and then it's gone. And it's like, wait, I was really into that particular one. So I'm sorry about that, but they'll be below. Here's another example right here of masking and making your stamp pretty much the focal point. So you can also take your stamps and not mask them, but rather just stamp them to make your own pattern paper look on the back. Best tip I can give for this is that you want to make sure that you go off of the paper at random. And the reason that is because it makes for a seamless look. It looks sort of like a continuous effort in your pattern paper look instead of just keeping everything confined. So here you can see I'm doing that. Now for these 2 particular ones, I'm going to make these cards very different from one another in the coloring aspect. One, I'm just going to keep it very simple, and I'm using Arteza alcohol markers here, and I'm just going to keep it simple with the coloring. So sort of like a clean look. This one, I'm just going to go nuts and be a 5-year-old and just color haphazardly and outside the lines because I was just having a good time. So after that, yeah, see, look, I just gave up and decided to go all the way and color outside the lines. But then I'm going to go back in and I'm going to make with a white gel pen some really cool just additions to the stars. So on the right, you can see it's very clean, a very clean look. On the left, it's very crazy, which I do believe I named that video in such a way because this card is a little nuts. So after that, I'm just going to finish off these cards. Here you can see I put an inlay die cut for the word celebrate and then thank you on the cleaner look. So yeah, so that's another technique that you can do when you're stamping. You can stamp, not have to mask, and just make your cards into your own pattern paper in the background. So that's what your background look is going for. Okay, so the next background technique that we are going to move into is going to be stencils. Stencils are just a favorite of mine. I love them. I have recently discovered stencils from scrapbook.com that are large, and they are wonderful for slimline cards as well as for 5x7 cards, so they're awesome. I'll show you a couple examples I used with those new stencils, but this one's an oldie but a goodie. I have this stencil from Tim Holtz, and it's a sunburst stencil. I love this one. I think this is one of my favorites in my stash. A little bit difficult to make cards that you want to do vertically though, particularly with slimline cards. It just makes it a tiny bit challenging. You just have to move up the stencil a little bit. But this is fun. Stenciling is so great. You can get a quick background. You can do different colors. You can see here I finished this card off with this amazing shoe. That's from Ink on 3, one of my favorite stamp sets. But yeah, so I just have a great time with the stencils. So here I'm going to show you snippets of 4 different ways to use your stencils as well. So right here we have traditional ink blending. So I'm just going to put down some distressed oxide and get this beautiful blend on this watercolor cardstock. I showed you before, oxides are great for ink blending. I can also spritz what's left over and then lift up this card for a reveal of more of an abstract stencil look from the leftover ink. So that was a lot of fun. Another way is to apply paste. So here I'm applying some glitter embossing paste over, and you can see the result of that as well. And it dries back because it dries a lot more clear than this. Not totally clear, but definitely a difference. And then the last one is you can use stencils for making embossing images, so you can get an impression of your stencil on your image here. Stencils are so versatile, and they are really inexpensive in comparison to a lot of the other products that we buy. So I can't say enough good things about stencils. I think they're a fantastic addition to any craft room. Yeah, they're just awesome. So many different ways that you can use them. So there's that. And I'm going to show you some finished cards, the ones that I showed you previously, and some additional ones as well. There are only a couple projects through this whole video that don't have a coordinating video to go with it to watch in full, and I will point those out so that you're not looking for that particular video. And here are some of the ways that I finished off those cards using the stencil techniques. So this, again, just a great thing to make backgrounds with. I could sit here and play with stencils all day long. If I didn't have to clean any of them, that would probably be even better. But you know, you just got to clean up your stuff real quick. Here's another one right here where I used a polka dot stencil. This one does not have a video to go with it, but I used two different stencils for this example. I used the cloud stencil and the rainbow stencil from scrapbook.com, and I just loved merging these two stencils together to kind of overlay the clouds on the rainbows. Oh, it was just so fun. Okay, last but not least, we have watercolor. So watercolor for backgrounds is tried and true. There's so many things you can do. First thing I'm going to show you though is the block technique. So I did not come up with this technique. This is all over. I didn't come up with a lot of these techniques, by the way, but this one's all over YouTube. But you can spritz an acrylic block here, and you can just place it down right onto your watercolor cardstock. You want to raise your anxiety level though, do this technique, because the nerves you feel when you're trying to flip that over and get it straight onto the paper, whew, and to get it straight onto the paper, I did not succeed as much. However, I went with it because it was so fun and so abstract. So no issue there, just do your best, but it's a really, really fun technique to do. I will show you my finished cards with this one. On one of them, I like shifted the block a little bit, and so it almost looked like it ended up looking like the tail of a book, or like the binding of a book. You'll see what I'm talking about. So on that one, I actually added some text stamping, so it looks like it was a book. So anyway, just sometimes, you know, you have an idea for a project, but the way that it comes out changes your entire perspective on it, and then you course correct and you come up with something completely different, which that's the fun of crafting, in my opinion. You just never know what's going to come of it. So here I'm showing you, I'm picking up my stamp, and this one got a really cool mix of colors. And then here's some of the finished cards that I did. I just used some simple stamping. These were very easy to do, but you can see that one on the right kind of has, it looks almost like a book or some sort of easel. I don't know, but I decided to go with it and add some words to it. I'll show you a couple close-ups as well. Again, very simple stamping, a couple sentiments, easy cards. I think these were made in 4 cards made in like 20 minutes. The next technique I'm going to show you, I'm using some Canson XL watercolors. Probably one of my favorite watercolor mediums to use. They're very vibrant. They're beautiful colors. So right here, pardon the lighting on this one, I was actually on a work trip and just decided to bring a couple different things to play with. But I wet my watercolor cardstock, and then I'm going to drop in some rainbow colors here. This is a fantastic, fun, free-flowing way to make a background with watercolors. It's just really easy to do. The Canson XL are very rich, and I love that I don't have to go over it too many times to get a beautiful color. You can also mute them a little bit by adding some water and not picking them up straight from the palette onto your card or your project. So that is an option as well that you can do. I just went right from the ink to my paper, so I did not mute them down at all, and you can see just how beautiful they are. This was actually more blue put into the yellow, so that obviously makes green. So I'm just adding some. Now here I did pull in a purple. I could have used a red to get that purple look, but I was going for a really vibrant purple here on the bottom. When you have a lot of pooling like that, you just want to take a paper towel or a tissue or something and just kind of sop that up, and that will get rid of that, and it'll keep your lines a little bit more in their place. So see how the green is kind of going up into the red. I didn't really like that, so I'm going to just pull that right out. Again, up here. And now watercoloring does dry back a bit, but even this, like I said, the Gansai Tambi, when they dry back, it's not gone. See how beautiful that is? So it's like still going to be a very good, fun watercolor look on the background. I finished those off with some Darcy stamps that I had, and they were just a lot of fun to play with. Watercoloring also comes in metallic watercoloring. So here I have a set from Arteza, and I'm going to show you just briefly about this set. This is a beautiful metallic watercolor set, really vibrant colors, very fun to play with. I definitely recommend swatching them out. They give you a black and white cardstock to do that with. I'm going to be using some black and white watercolor cardstock for my projects here. And I am just taking some household items and craft items to make some shapes. And this was inspired, if you watched this video, this one was inspired by my 7-year-old's art project from school. They wanted them to do basically just this. Overlay images that you have in the house and then color them or design them in any way. And I thought, oh, that's really fun. You don't even need any special stamps. You can just pull out a glass, as I did here, and just start coloring. So I pulled out these to try and show you what the metallic watercolors would look on both white and black cardstock. You still get a beautiful shimmer shine on both. You can see the vibrancy that these are going down. They do show up extremely well on black, indeed, but they really show up well on the white as well. So that was really good to kind of see the differences there. If you want to get a mix of colors overlaying each other like I'm doing here, I recommend heat setting it like I am, because then you're going to get a more true color. So I go back a couple more times. I'm not going to show you that, but I'm going to show you the finished look of this card so you can kind of see how those colors just come to life. And you can see that beautiful shine and shimmer. And I just finished it off with a wonderful sentiment. You can do anything one day. I hope to be like you. So that was a lot of fun. The next one that I show with the black cardstock and the squares, I'm just going to skip a bunch of the coloring here to the end. I show the full coloring in the other video, but right here I am going to color down, and this is, interestingly enough, I did not swatch out my inks when I was making these cards. I swatched them afterwards, so that's why I recommend doing it before, so you can kind of see what they look like in real time. I kind of was playing a guessing game here, so that's definitely something I recommend doing. But after I colored in all of my images on this card, you still have that beautiful pearlescent look. I go back and get the color that I desire. Then I'm going to go in with a white gel pen. I'm going to just finish it off like this. I don't know where my brain was that day, but I thought this was kind of cool. And I add a lot more of those dotted lines to more of the squares throughout the project. And it's really starting to come together. Honestly, when I first started this, I thought, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this. This is looking nuts. But I really ended up liking it in the end. It was very abstract. It was just fun to try new and different things. And you just have to experiment. And sometimes it doesn't come out the way you want. Sometimes it does. I'm going to add some white dots here right on the end, or all around the cardstock rather. And some are big, some are little. Loving that Milky Pop white gel pen. That's one of my favorites. I also use the Signo white gel pen. That's a good one as well. And that will finish up those two cards. So that was a lot of fun to do. The metallic inks are definitely one of my favorite to play with. So that will do it for 10 ways to make backgrounds. Hopefully this was a fun and inspirational one-stop shop that you can refer back to. Like I said throughout the video, all the correlating videos that show the projects in full will be linked below, so you can find them there, and I'll put them in order that they appeared in this video, as well as all the items that I used throughout the video. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. You can ask me in the comment section. You can also find other social media platforms in my link tree below, as well as affiliate links to shop through if you are in the market to do so. I will see you all in the next video. Have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.